This question here from the passage reads, which of the following are similarities between Reagan and Bush? Now, both Reagan and Bush had a childhood dominated by fear. That's the first sentence which has been given to you. Apart from it, there are two more sentences from which you have four other options from which you have to choose from. Now, it says here that both Reagan and Bush had a childhood dominated by fear. This is very much the similarity between both Reagan and Bush. As the passage says in the last question too, I discussed this, that see right here it says that Ronald Reagan's childhood, in contrast to Jimmy Carter, was like that of most presidents. It was a nightmare of neglect and abuse, it says here. And then in his case, dominated by an obsessively religious mother and a violent alcoholic father. So he was beaten, he was abused, he was neglected. It was very much so about George Bush too. It says that though not as chaotic as Reagan's, it was also, it says that's the main word here, full of fear and punishment. So that's what we have here about George Bush and Ronald Reagan. So that first point is a similarity between both Reagan and Bush. Now the second point says both had personality problems. It talks about personality problems resulting from troubled childhood experience. Now we have established the fact that both of them had troubled childhood experiences, but does it say that, as the point says, did they have personality problems resulting from these? Yes, it is very true about both of them. For instance, about Reagan here, it says that as an adult, Reagan took to carrying a loaded pistol. He once considered suicide. See, that's what it says. So he did have personality issues, and then he became an anti-communist warrior, right? So crusading against imaginary enemies that continues, who were blamed for the feelings that he denied himself. So there were he had personality issues. That was Reagan. What about George Bush? We know this part of the paragraph talks about his abusive father. Then later it says here that about when he grew up, it says, see, it's here, as a result, a desperate need to please was George's main trait as a child, and a depressive personality with an overwhelming need to placate became his trademarks as a president. So isn't that very well clear that both of them grew up because of their childhood to have personality problems? What about the third point? Now, okay, as soon as we have 1 and 2 both true, we can eliminate this option, we can eliminate B, and we can at least eliminate none of the above. So now we're left with C, but then even then, I'd like to point out how we get to point number 3, which is both would have found it difficult to resist the call of war. Towards the start of the passage, right here, it says, not every American president has been able to resist his nation's call for war. And then the paragraph went on to describe Jimmy Carter as an unusual president, one who had fairly loving parents, and that is how he could resist America's call for war. But then it says that studies have shown that the main determinant is the kind of childhood the president has experienced. Both Reagan and Bush had really bad experiences as children because they were neglected, they were abused, and that is how this childhood or this abusive childhood that they had was a main determinant in the fact that both of them led America into major wars. And that's how we have both all 1, 2, and 3, A, B, and C as the correct points here. This is the question. Both all Reagan and Bush both had some personality problems, and that they found it difficult to resist the call of war. So our answer for this question becomes option C, all of the above. The question here reads, which of the following statements cannot be concluded on the basis of the passage? Now let's try and go one by one. The first sentence here in A, in the first option, it says, some of the Americans did experience a feeling of depression in the period after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now yes, this is very much true that once the Berlin Wall fell in communist Germany, there were a lot of people in America who did feel depression. See, it says here that right here in this paragraph, America too felt, I can mark that part for you, it says, America too felt just terrible after the downfall of the Berlin Wall. And then further ahead in the paragraph, it says, everywhere were predictions of doom, decline, and deaths of the American dream, and people are incredibly depressed. That is what the New York Times had to say or report about the people or the mood, general mood. So, therefore, we can infer this particular point from the paragraph. This is correct. Some of the British faced self-doubt and self-humiliation after the collapse of the Soviet Empire. Does that is that mentioned by the passage? Is that mentioned in the passage by the author? Let's go to that part in the paragraph about the Britishers feeling, or what they felt. See, it says here, um, right here in this paragraph, it says here in the paragraph below that an authority on Britain, finds the British undergoing self-doubt and self-humiliation greater now than at any time. And what period of time is this talking about? It says here in the previous paragraph, in 1989, however, America's traditional enemy, that is the Soviet Union, it collapsed. So it's the era when the Soviet Union had collapsed, and then there were no real enemies, and therefore both after the end of the evil empire, so as to say, both America and Europe and Britain specifically here, as per the point in our question, they found themselves undergoing self-doubt and self-humiliation. So we have this point again as the correct point. Some of the British did face self-doubt and self-humiliation after the collapse of the Soviet Empire. What about point C? It says periods of peace and prosperity may end in wars. Yes, this again is there in the passage. It has been mentioned. It comes through our reading. Where is it? Where can we find it in the passage? Right here. It says the mood of America as Bush ran for presidency was also quite depressed. Then it says during the 80s, in what is often, I can mark this part for you. It says during the 80s, in what is often misnamed a decade of indulgence, America had, this is the important part, had an unprecedented period of peace and prosperity. So there was a period of peace and prosperity, the latter based mainly on, it says, manic spending binges on the military and on financial speculation. It reads in the first line of the slide here. And then it says that as will, this is the important part, as will be shown, manic periods such as these, such as the period which was reflected by peace and prosperity, these usually climax in wars. So there can be manic periods like these which are characteristic of peace and prosperity, and they can climax in wars. This is what the author says in the passage, and therefore we also have C as the correct inference. The only statement that cannot be inferred, as the question asks, or cannot be concluded from the passage is D. Why is it the answer? It says the American economic recession was caused by the Americans themselves due to their feelings of depression. No. From the reading of the passage here towards the last part, the author does say that with no foreign enemy onto whom we could project our fears, America had only one option to end its feeling of depression, which was to have a sacrificial economic recession that would punish them, which is the Americans and their families, for their peace and prosperity. So he's the only thing that the author is saying here is that it was one of the options, right, that they had, that America had, but it doesn't necessarily dictate or mean that America very deliberately caused the economic recession, as the option says here, that the economic recession in America was caused by Americans themselves due to their feelings of depression. This is not, or this cannot be concluded from that part of the paragraph. All he's saying is that that was one option that they had that might have happened. That is, he's leading to a possibility of it happening, not conclusively that that did happen, that the American economic recession was caused by the Americans themselves because they were feeling depressed. So that is how we have D as the answer to this question. For this question, you have to find out which of the following statements are correct according to the passage, or can be taken from the passage to be true? Now, it says here, the first one, that the American people felt a wave of depression accompanied by an apocalyptic feeling, and this was because of the shattering of the American dream. See, the previous part, the first part of the sentence, or option A, might be correct or is correct. But what about this part? It says that this was because of the shattering of the American dream. No, the shattering of the American dream was a possibility, or was a feeling that people felt during that time. See, it says here in this part of the paragraph, everywhere there were predictions of this part. See, it says everywhere there were predictions of doom, decline, and importantly, the death of the American dream. So this is what was there. There were predictions of the death of the American dream, a possibility, a feeling of this happening, but then not that it really happened, or that this was the reason behind the American people feeling depressed. So we can eliminate this option, which is option A. Also, along with this, then we can eliminate option C, since it again also mentions that the apocalyptic feeling led to people wondering why the American dream was shattered. No, the American dream had not been shattered. It was only a feeling that they had. What about option D? It says a feeling of cataclysm spread among the Americans because of the breakdown of the Berlin Wall. Yes, that is true, but which signified the general escalation of conflict in the world. This is the part that the passage does not mention. If you go through the passage, you will not be able to find any such mention that the breakdown of the Berlin Wall, which led to a feeling of cataclysm among the Americans. This signified the general escalation of conflict, that overall conflict in the world had increased on the whole. No, this is not mentioned in the passage. So that is how we are left with option B through elimination 2. But then that is very much mentioned in the passage, that decrease of enemies may lead to a situation where an anxious nation, for example America, given in the passage, is unable to find objects to project their fears on, which can lead to a feeling of doom and depression, as we have discussed with the previous questions, and also is clearly mentioned in the passage. I can lead you to that part and point you out. See, it says here, um, okay, right here in this paragraph, it says that um, however, America's traditional enemy, the Soviet Union, had collapsed in a period of unprecedented, see, I'm marking it here, a period of unprecedented world peace without any real enemies had broken out all over. And right after this, at the end of the evil empire, both America and Europe were plunged into depression. So this is why, and then the next paragraph goes on to explain this, as we have already discussed. So that is why this can be inferred from the passage, which is option B, being the answer to this question, that a decrease of enemies can lead to a feeling of doom and depression.